Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and welcome back to another episode of the Carnivore Kitchen podcast. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today we're going to be having steak and discussing the importance of movement. And for those of you who want to use steak to make the most mouth-watering meatballs you've ever tried, then check out the recipe link in the description. The name of today's episode is Movement That Matters. Everyone knows how important it is to move and to move often. However, the problem is that very few people know how to move correctly. There's a lot of misinformation when it comes to proper exercise technique, and this is because, as with nutrition, most of the information that is being espoused is coming from the bodybuilding and powerlifting world, which is great if you're trying to pack on the most amount of muscle or lift the heaviest amount of weight that you can. However, if your goal is to optimize the way your body is functioning, make your daily tasks easier, and eliminate any aches and pains that you may have, then you shouldn't be following that advice. Before we get into proper exercise technique, let's discuss movement and the movements that matter most and that are most directly applicable to your daily life. There are 7 primal movement patterns that, in the past, would have been required for early humans to survive, and in the present, are required if you would like to function throughout the day without requiring the assistance of someone else. Those 7 primal movement patterns are squat, bend, lunge, push, pull, twist, and gait. First, let's discuss the squat pattern. Before humans invented plumbing, humans would have needed to squat in order to evacuate their bowels, and they would have had to do so in a deep squat position. This is because of the way our digestive system is designed. Feces needs to travel up the ascending colon, which is located on the right side of the body, then across the transverse colon, and down the descending colon, which is located on the left side of your body, in order to leave your body. By getting into a deep squat position, our right thigh is able to press up against the ascending colon, which aids in the evacuation process by forcing feces up the ascending colon. The other thing worth noting is that humans need to relax in order to loosen up the anal sphincter to allow the bowels to easily evacuate. If you are clenching, then you won't be able to fully evacuate your bowels, and it could also cause you to strain, which can lead to other problems such as hemorrhoids. In order to get into a deep squat without straining or clenching, you need to have the proper foot placement, and you need to be able to squat with your knees over your toes, which is the opposite of the way most people are taught to squat. Today, because of the invention of plumbing in the toilet, we no longer need to get into a deep squat in order to poo. However, we still need to use the squat pattern on a daily basis. First thing in the morning, when you get out of bed, you need to be able to squat in order to stand up. Anytime you sit down into a chair or stand up from that chair, you are squatting. Plan on driving somewhere? Well, you need to be able to do a pistol squat in order to get into your car seat. The squat pattern is used countless times throughout the day, and if you would like to squat properly, then the way in which you should squat is going to be dictated by your morphology. Let's start from the ground up and take a look at your foot placement. Everyone is taught to squat with the feet hip-width apart. However, for someone with a wider and shorter pelvis, then they will be able to squat more effectively and efficiently with their feet wider. Whereas someone who has a taller and more narrow pelvis would be able to squat more effectively and efficiently with a more narrow stance. Generally, women tend to have a wider and shorter pelvis, whereas men tend to have a taller and more narrow pelvis. This means that the average woman would benefit to squat with a wider stance than the average man. Next, let's move up to the knees. Most people are taught to squat without allowing their knees to go over their toes. This is terrific advice if you are a power lifter trying to squat the most amount of weight possible. However, if you're more interested in optimizing your body mechanics, then you absolutely want to learn how to squat with your knees over your toes. By constantly squatting with vertical shins as opposed to squatting with your knees over your toes, your soleus muscles and gastrocnemius muscles, or your calf muscles, are constantly in a shortened position. This can lead to tightness in your calves and limited mobility in your ankles. To contrast this, by squatting with your knees over your toes, you are going to create more myofascial tension along your calves, which will increase the muscular recruitment of those muscles, as well as improve the mobility in your ankles. Next, let's move up to the pelvis and the lumbar spine. Most people are taught to stick their butts out or to anteriorly tilt their pelvis when they squat. When you move into anteversion of the pelvis, or an anteriorly tilted pelvis, this will decrease recruitment of your abdominal muscles as they will continually be in a stretched position. An anteversion of the pelvis will also often be coupled with hyperextension of the lumbar spine. When you hyperextend the lumbar spine, this will cause compression of the backside of the intervertebral discs, which can lead to things such as low back pain. Rather than sticking your butt out, it would benefit you to tuck your butt in or to maintain retroversion or a posterior tilt of your pelvis when you squat. This will increase the amount of abdominal recruitment that you get, as your abdominals will be engaged during the exercise, and it will increase the amount of tension that is placed on the low back, which will help to stabilize the lumbar spine and be more beneficial for people with low back, hip, and knee pain. Now, let's move on to another primal pattern, the bend pattern. If there's one pattern that humans have been doing since the dawn of time, it's the bend pattern. Anytime early humans needed to pick something up off the ground, build shelter, or prepare food, they would have had to use the bend pattern in order to do so. Today, the bend pattern is mostly going to be used when picking objects off the floor. If you order something, you're going to need to bend over in order to pick the box up off the floor. If you drop your keys, you're going to need to bend over in order to pick them up. If you have a small child, you're going to need to bend over in order to pick them up and carry them or place them into their stroller. A common bend pattern exercise, and one that a lot of people get injured doing, is the deadlift. When you are performing the bend pattern, one of the most important things you're going to want to do is to activate your transverse abdominis or your TVA and brace your core. You can think of your transverse abdominis as your body's internal weightlifting belt. It's one of the muscles that helps to stabilize your spine and is a very important muscle to learn how to use properly, particularly for people with low back pain. The transverse abdominis is responsible for compressing the abdominal contents. Therefore, in order to activate the muscle, you want to imagine that you are bringing your belly button in toward your spine. This will activate your transverse abdominis and help to stabilize your spine whenever you are picking something up off the ground. You also want to brace your core by imagining that someone is trying to punch you in your stomach. If someone were to try to punch you in the stomach, you would instinctively tighten up your core and brace for the impact. So, the next time you are performing a bend pattern exercise, such as the deadlift, draw your belly button in toward your spine and brace yourself throughout the duration of the exercise. Next, we have the lunge pattern. The lunge pattern would have been used by early humans while traversing through rough terrain. Let's say there was a fallen tree or a large rock in between you and where you needed to get to. Early humans would have needed to lunge over or onto the object in order to pass it. Today, we use the lunge pattern primarily to walk up and down stairs. As with the bend pattern, it is going to be very important to activate your transverse abdominis and brace your core whenever performing any lunge pattern exercise, as this will help to stabilize your spine and reduce the chance of injury. This brings us to the push pattern, the pull pattern, and the twist pattern. The push, pull, and twist patterns would have been used by early humans to pick up and move around heavy objects and to hunt for food. If you were building shelter, you would have needed to use the push and pull patterns to move and clear objects out of the way. If you were hunting for food, you would have needed to use the push pattern and the twist pattern in order to throw rocks or man-made spears at the animal you were trying to kill. Today, we use the push, pull, and twist patterns to open and close doors, to pick up objects off the ground and place them overhead onto a shelf, and to perform daily tasks like mowing the lawn or gardening. As for how these patterns pertain to exercise, most of the pushing and pulling that we perform in our daily lives are either going to be vertical pushing and pulling, like bending over to pick up an object and then pulling that object toward the sky while pulling it closer into you, or pressing that object over your head, such as placing objects onto a high shelf. The other kind of pushing and pulling that we primarily perform on a daily basis is standing horizontal pushing or pulling, like opening and closing doors or pushing objects out of our way. So, you want the exercises you perform in the gym to mimic those activities. Exercises like a barbell bench press or seated cable row won't be too applicable to our daily lives, as most people are rarely laying on their backs while needing to move heavy objects off of them. However, exercises such as standing shoulder presses, bent over rows, and standing horizontal cable presses and pulls are very applicable to our daily lives, as we are constantly picking things up off the ground and placing them overhead, and pushing and pulling objects from a standing position. As for the twist pattern, you can't really get into your car or put your seatbelt on without using the twist pattern, so incorporating exercises such as cable wood chops and Russian twists would be terrific additions to your exercise routine. Furthermore, the twist pattern is also an essential pattern that works synergistically with the last primal movement pattern, the gait pattern. Gait is walking and sprinting, and early humans would have used the gait pattern to either walk where they needed to get to, or to sprint away from an animal or person that was trying to harm them. Today, we're not being chased by animals or running for our lives. However, we still need to be able to walk if we want to get anywhere, and if you're ever late for something like an appointment or you're trying not to miss the bus, you may need to sprint on occasion. When we walk or sprint, our opposite limbs are moving in the same direction, which will create this twisting of the spine. When our right leg is moving forward, so is our left arm. And then, when we take a step with the left leg and bring the left leg forward, it's now the right arm that is moving forward. This is one of the reasons why the twist pattern is a very important pattern to train and one that is often neglected. So, the next time you are in the gym, make sure that you are performing movements that matter and that you are incorporating the squat, bend, lunge, push, pull, twist, and gait patterns for optimal function, health, and performance.
Thanks for hanging around until the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and comment down in the comment section, as it would really help out with the algorithm. And also share this video so we can help get this information out to as many people as possible. And also subscribe to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right hand corner and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the videos. For those of you interested in health optimization, you can check out the video in the top right corner where I discuss the 6 foundation principles. And for those of you interested in optimizing your performance, then consider becoming a member. It's only $5 per month and you get a ton of perks, including exclusive access to this program design lecture series playlist above my head.